Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the Army's Operation Inclusion, a peaceful protest update, Attorney General Barr Goes to D.C., and COVID censors and death panels. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. The congressman, a congressman from Alabama, Congressman Mo Brooks, exposed and brought to the surface and is calling attention to a training program inside the U.S. Army. It's a training program that was to occur apparently in his home state, Mo Brooks' home state of Alabama, at Redstone Arsenal. It was for uniformed and civilian personnel. The program, which has been put out, and people at this Redstone Arsenal who are invited to attend, uniformed and civilian personnel, is put out by the U.S. Army's Equity and Inclusion Agency. Equity and Inclusion Agency. What is intended, what was going to be taught in this course that people could go to, again, Army, people who are actually enrolled in the Army, people who are active military, as well as civilian personnel from the Army's Office of Equity and Inclusion, included teaching people how to speak in a way that was inclusive, how to not use terms or have missions or beliefs that were inconsistent with what this entity was calling their equity and inclusion agenda. Among the things labeled, they had a pyramid, they have a description of the kind of things that are really, really bad. And so on the top of the pyramid, one example that was a phrase described as a symbol, a signal of COVID white supremacy was "Make America Great Again." The U.S. Army, at the time the Commander-in-Chief is President Donald Trump, whose "Make America Great Again" slogan galvanized voters in 2016, is galvanizing them again now. The actual Army functioning under this president was hosting a program, planned to host a program by the Army's Office of Inclusion and Equity, describing the expression "Make America Great Again" as covert white supremacy. Other phrases that are going to be taught in this course, taught to people who are part of the Army. And by the way, this program was intended, ultimately, they wanted to have it taught to all upper-level Army generals and people in high positions in the Army. Other things that you can't say that were to be excluded from the vocabulary from people in the military include saying all lives matter, include denying white privilege, include anything that is characterized as anti-immigration, English-only initiatives, celebration of Columbus Day, speaking of American exceptionalism, claiming reverse discrimination against whites, and even using the expression, "there is only one race, the human race." These were all to be taught by the Army to people at the Redstone Arsenal, uniformed and civilian personnel. Congressman Mo Brooks, a Republican from Alabama, called it out and said, you know what, we cannot go down this path. We cannot be teaching this as though it is Army policy, as though it is American policy, that you cannot say these things. Dozens more suspect both phrases and themes, things you can't say, things you can't talk about, things you can't believe in. We're going to be taught your taxpayer dollars at work, by the way, your taxpayer dollars at work, because the U.S. Army Office of Equity and Inclusion thought up a program where they could basically dive bomb, it could basically bomb, attack, destroy many of the messages that are mainstream America, mainstream political conversation, acceptable conversation in a country rooted in freedom, and ideas that many conservatives are trying to talk about, and ideas actually the president's trying to talk about. they actually managed to get to the point of sending out this memo, inviting people to sign up for this before it caught the attention of Mo Brooks. He has now asked for the Army to basically, he's asked to call them out and said he wants Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy and Army General Counsel to look into this. To look into how in the world did this get passed, did this get into place so that we're thinking of teaching these things to members of the military, people who are serving our country. It's indoctrination, left-wing, political correctness, indoctrination of people in the Army, intended, as I said, ultimately to be taught to the highest levels of officers in the Army and probably everywhere else if they could only succeed in getting it there. Fortunately, Mo Brooks has called attention to this. I raise it in today's First Five as kind of a continuation of a theme I've been on recently, which is to recognize the anti-American left, the left committed to destroying America, is relentless. Relentless. They are doing things right under our noses. It's been happening, as we've talked about many times on the show recently. For the last 80 years, you've had the communists in this country, since the 1920s and on, up into 100 years, working to push the anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian society, anti-freedom agenda that the communists embrace and love and push. They have been at work insidiously putting that agenda into American schools, colleges, grad schools, kindergarten, throughout the public school system, and in our culture, and all sorts of institutions in our country, even in the Army. And I'm hoping in this era of Donald Trump, the era of someone coming along and actually committing to drain the swamp, which does not mean just to get rid of people in Washington, get them out of there who have been mired in the Washington swamp for too long, who are deep state people who push their own agenda and decide what they want America to be, and they ignore the commander in chief, they ignore the will of the people, they ignore why the people in this country voted for Donald Trump. That deep state mentality President Trump committed to. He ran on draining the swamp, not just of the people who do that, but the ideas about the embedded ruling class mindset in Washington. Certainly the anti-American left that has placed people, especially during the Obama administration, placed the anti-American leftist Marxist mindset in very high places in our government, in the CIA, FBI, DOJ, NSA, all sorts of places. You had President Obama for 8 years insidiously planting anti-American leftists in very high positions in our government. So now we're at the point that you had the military actually planning to train people on your tax dollar, train people to think that they can't say "Make America Great Again." They can't question the agenda of white privilege, which is basically to force the radical Black Lives Matter agenda on everyone. It was a great thing that Mo Brooks called this to America's attention. Astonishing we've gotten this far, but it is a great reminder. You can never have your eyes closed. You can never, for a moment, drop your guard. The left in this country is not about just winning one election, moving America a little bit toward maybe higher taxes on the rich and maybe larger benefits through our government programs. That's not where the left lives anymore. They haven't lived there in a long time. The anti-American left in this country lives in the world of destroying the idea of America, the beauty, the greatness, and dare I say it, the exceptional nature of America. That's where the left lives, and we better be wide awake every day, recognizing the many, many avenues and venues they have found to push their anti-American garbage. It's a great thing Mo Brooks brought this out. I hope there is an order, perhaps an executive order, if nothing else can suffice, an executive order shutting this garbage down. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. Okay, I want to talk to you. There's so much going on in America. It's kind of amazing. We live in these times that, I don't know, maybe every era of American history felt like this, but we live right now in America in extremely consequential times. Extremely consequential times. Times when the very fabric and culture, the very idea of America is under assault. Part of the assault, part of the way the left accomplishes this assault, is by failing to be honest about things that are happening. Yesterday in the show, if you were watching, you know I played the little clip. It was just a video clip of a person who was in Washington, D.C., happened to come across Congressman Jerry Nadler, the Democrat from New York, who's been in Congress, I looked later, 30 years, basically his entire adult life. And he was asked to comment by this person who happened to have, one of those, it wasn't just a random citizen, it was one of those kind of Breitbart-like people who had a video camera and a microphone, said, hey, what do you think? Asked him, what do you think about the violence in Portland? What do you think about that? And he responded that the Marxist violence in Portland was a myth. It wasn't true. Called it a myth. A myth, as he said, floating around Washington. It's a myth, doesn't exist. So today in Washington, there is testimony. Jerry Nadler, because he's been in Congress so long and because the Democrats control the House, he is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. So he called Attorney General Barr in for testimony. Several other times he's been set, didn't happen. But this, he called him in for testimony. So today they're having this hearing. Right now as we're speaking, right now while I'm talking to you. But one great thing that happened this morning in this hearing was, so to be clear, Nadler is calling in Attorney General Barr to accuse him of, essentially acting like President Trump's attorney, looking out for President Trump instead of doing his job properly, accusing him and really berating him over the idea that President Trump thinks is justified to send troops in to protect federal property in all of these cities where these peaceful protests are happening, or in Nadler's terms, these mythical protests are happening. And so this hearing is starting today, and one of the great things that happened early on was that there's a House member, Jim Jordan, who had ready, he had a great opening. I couldn't grab it to have ready for today, but he had a great opening in which he played a video. And I have a friend who works on Capitol Hill who sent me a version we can play today. This is from the House Judiciary Committee hearing. This is what Jordan and the entire nation, if they were watching, certainly the entire people who are members of the House Judiciary Committee and whoever else was watching, they got to watch this video at the U.S. Congress. And this, Matt the Wonderful, is the video I sent you as a follow-up. You do have it, I assume? Yeah, man. Okay, so he has it. So this is what Jim Jordan played today on the House floor in the hearing where you had Nadler calling in Attorney General Barr. Here is what Jordan played.
How I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protesters.
Peaceful protest.
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 Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protests.
Peaceful protesters.
On behalf of myself, my children, and the family of David Dorn, we'd like to thank friends, neighbors, co-workers, and the community for showing all the love and support we've suffered through the tragic loss of my husband, my beloved husband, David Dorn. We'd also like to thank St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department for their hard work and perseverance through this investigation, as well as Circuit Attorney's Office. He dedicated his life to the city of St. Louis, retiring at the rank of captain after 38 years of distinguishable service. Then as the chief of Moline Acres for almost 6 years. During those years, he's touched so many lives as a friend, mentor, co-worker, and guardian. His life was senselessly taken from me, from us, by an opportunist who had no regards for human life or the law. This didn't have to happen, but it must have been God's plan for David. We need to come together as a community and do better. We need to teach our young people that life is very precious. We as a family are going to be taking some time to focus our attention on healing.
And that, I'm sure you gathered, is the widow of the St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn, murdered during these peaceful protests. In fact, he wasn't even on duty. He went down into St. Louis because he was aware of a friend of his store or shop was going to be vandalized, or worried it was, trying to protect his friend's property, literally murdered in the streets, body left on the sidewalk by these peaceful protesters. There was a very powerful video. I only played a short portion of it. You can find the rest of it. I'm pretty sure it's at our website, americacanwetalk.org. I'll be sure that that video is up. I want to encourage you not just to get angry, and we should all be livid at the destruction and murder and arson and destruction of property and just the complete disruption of normal human life in America that is occurring in major cities in our country. We should be completely disgusted and angry and wanting arrests and prosecutions. But I raise it today to also ask you, how in the world can the people who have the Democrat majority in the House, who are running the House Judiciary Committee, how can their reaction be to what you just saw? And what you saw is a tiny portion. It is a sliver of what has been happening. In Portland, we're up to at least 50, I think it's in the 60s now, 63 days or something, of continuing, ongoing burning, riots, protests, window smashing, burning cars, murder. All of this is happening. And you have the Democrats in Washington. Their answer is, let's call in that Attorney General Barr and make him explain himself. How can he dare do this? How dare he say, how dare President Trump think that we have to send in federal troops to defend federal property? Why don't we just let those people burn those buildings down? This has to be in the back of their minds. The members of the Democrat members of the judiciary, the entire Democrat leadership in Washington, you can't get them to say anything about what's happening. And yet you can watch that video and realize everyone sane, everyone who wants to be law-abiding, who wants to own a business, who wants to live in peace, is going to leave all these cities. I showed you yesterday, Minneapolis is a ghost town, the area where all the protesting was. Portland's the same. People are going to leave these areas, not just going to live there. And the answer of the Democrats is to complain because President Trump is actually trying to defend public property in these cities. I want you to really ask yourself, what in the world is the Democrats' motivation? How can they be okay with this? Why isn't there, which there would be in a sane world, there would be Democrats and Republicans coming together to say, we have to solve this, and to start with, we're not going to allow the continued murder and arson and property destruction and riots and that one little clip you saw in there, they had people were throwing bottles of water at police. You had people throwing dangerous objects at police officers. This would be, in any other world, everyone sane would be immediately standing up and saying, we're going to shut this down, this cannot continue. But the Democrat Party's only problem they see with it, the only problem they see is that President Trump is trying to stop it. Or at least he's trying to defend public property. There were arrests, by the way, in Portland, which is at least good. Arrests in Portland. There were 18. I think there have been more since then. But these are arrests of the people who we showed the video yesterday who had tried to board up a federal building so that the people inside, they knew were inside, couldn't get out, and then light it on fire. So there were arrests in Portland. That's a start. U.S. charges on Friday unveiled against 18 Portland, Oregon protesters, probably worse than professors in there. In fact, there was one video, montage of the pictures of the people arrested. Some of them are school teachers, but hey, no worries. I'm sure they do a great job teaching your kids. But these people were arrested for all sorts of, property destruction. They were arrested for their very violent conduct toward the police and their attempt to endangering lives or attempt to set fire. So this is the federal government saying, we're actually going to step up here. We're not going to let this continue. I want you to think what would happen if the Democrats were in charge at the White House and had the majority in the Senate and the House. I mean, the governors are permitting this in Democrat states. The Democrat mayors are permitting this. Everybody seems to be permitting this. Where would it end? Who would stop it? Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, if Biden is elected, things will probably settle down. I will tell you, folks, this is an argument, this is an angle, a manipulation the left has. This idea that says, look, Trump is just too divisive. The problem is Trump. He's just too divisive. And if we just get him out and get somebody else in, get Biden in, things will settle down. It's really just Trump is too divisive. That's the problem. This will be a theme and an argument you hear from the left, that all of this is the result of Donald Trump being divisive. And folks, understand, this violence has nothing to do with Donald Trump being divisive. It does have to do with the fact that Donald Trump shocked the daylights out of the left by winning the election in 2016, and that he's continuing plowing forward in making America great again and draining the swamp and cracking down on the just entrenched left-wing establishment in Washington and around this country. The left is livid that Donald Trump is not going along with what they have understood as the ruling class right to rule this country, to be in charge, to never listen to the people. The left is on a march to do what they've always wanted to do. At this point, the Marxist left has overtaken the Democrat Party, and they're livid that anyone is standing up. They're livid that Donald Trump is standing up and stopping them. Donald Trump is standing up for America. He is our shield against the radical left. Very, very few Republicans have the bravery of Jim Jordan. What you saw just now, there's a handful, really, handful in the U.S. House, U.S. Senate together, who have the bravery of Jim Jordan and a few others to stand up and point out what the left is up to. But I wanted to make that point about the protest in Washington, Portland and Seattle. And by the way, they've sent federal officers to Seattle. They're talking about making arrests there. I mean, we are really at the beginning of the Marxist revolution in America. The intellectual Marxist revolution has been happening for decades. We're watching the physical revolution. You have to get that. These aren't just protesters still thinking about George Floyd. Nothing to do with that. They probably know who George Floyd is. These are Marxist protesters. And mostly orchestrated by white Marxists, white people who are the Marxists, the leaders of the Marxist movement in this country, who are completely using Black America, completely using the arguments of racism to stir young people, ignorant people into outrage, and probably some of them being paid, probably many of them being paid, stir them into outrage so they will continue attacking America. And it is just there's no other answer but the harsh crackdown. There's no answer about negotiating with them. There's no answer that says, well, tell us what you think, meet you halfway. You can't negotiate with these protesters for the same reason we don't negotiate with Islamic terrorists, because they want to kill you. They want to end you. They want to destroy you. So we don't negotiate with them, and we don't negotiate with these Marxist terrorists who are destroying America's cities. I want to play that little clip, really quite poignant. There is a Black police officer in Portland who was interviewed, a very lengthy interview, very, very kind of profound, really. Because he's a Black police officer, he's in Portland, and he sat down, did an interview describing what it's like to deal with these protesters, being a Black police officer in Portland. So I think Matt the Wonderful has that clip.
I got to see folks that really do want change, like the rest of us, that have been impacted by racism. And then I got to see those people get faded out by people that have no idea what racism is all about, never experienced racism, that don't even know that the tactics that they are using are the same tactics that were used against my people. And they don't even know the history. They don't know what they're saying. Coming from someone who graduated from PSU with a history degree, it's actually frightening on how, they say if you don't know your history, you repeat it, and watching people do that to other people just because of what they decide to do with their life.
What are some of those interactions that you're...
So a lot of times someone of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian, come up to the fence and directly want to talk to me. Hey, what do you think about George Floyd? What do you think about what happened about this? I go up to the fence, someone white comes up, F the police, don't talk to him. That was the most bizarre thing because I could see it coming. I even had a young African American girl tell me, "Why is it you guys aren't talking to us?" I said, "Honestly, this is now the 23rd day of doing it. Every time I try to have a conversation with someone that looks like me, someone white comes up and blocks them and tells them not to talk. And then right when I said that, this white girl popped right in front of her. She said, 'He just said that was going to happen.' I said, I told you. She looked at the girl and said, 'Why did you do that?' And I straight up, I said, I've been called the N-word. She's been called the N-word. Why are you talking to me this way? Why do you feel that she can't speak for herself to me? Why is it that you feel you need to speak for her when we're having a conversation?" And she couldn't answer my question.
Do you not love that? I will say, and I've done so much conversation on the show, so many stories and vignettes and interviews and clips to try to get at the idea and talk about the importance of America, the importance of the idea of America, to try to lay out the points that no one is claiming America's perfect. No one is claiming there's no racism in America. No one is claiming every police officer is perfect. No one's claiming every interaction between police and citizens is perfect. But the difference is when people want to try to fix problems, like this officer is talking about. He's talking about, yes, he's seen racism. Yes, he's been the victim of it. Yes, he feels for people who are really, truly trying to be part of a productive protest to say, we're concerned about racism. We've seen this happen. He acknowledges, that officer acknowledges racism happens. That kind of conversation, healthiest, best conversation there could be, vital, ongoing. We will always have more conversations in America about better ways to understand each other, better ways to hear the grievances, and it should be two-sided, both sides listening to what the other is saying, the other's perspective, what's happening. These are good things. And folks, these conversations are already happening. I mean, maybe we need more often, but police in this country have been very active, and especially in recent years, trying to understand the community, having dialogue with the community, having town halls with the community, having assessments of the police department. How can we better improve our policing procedures? When we had Brandon Tatum on this show, who's a co-founder of Blexit, I think it was like 4 weeks ago now or so, he was talking about almost everything of the demands of the Black Lives Matter movement that they put out when they claimed that Chaz area in Seattle. Basically everything they demanded is already happening. He said it was just a farce. They were demanding, we need to have, and they had a list of demands about police and the community getting along. He said, we're already doing all those things. Almost every community, a police department has banned the chokehold except in emergency circumstances. Already, all the police officers have already done this, already done that. I want to make this point because it's so important to understand. Nobody's saying everything's fine, shut up and go home. No one's saying that. But you have to understand the people working to productively make America better, make us a more perfect union, are on the conservative side, are on the right. What you are watching happen in the streets of Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and cities all over this country is not an effort to bring dialogue, not an effort to understand, not an effort to say, let's make a list of demands or requests and negotiate. We are watching the destruction of this country. And we're watching it at the hands of people who have no demands they can articulate. There's no list of demands. There's no, other than saying, we want justice or something that has no specificity. You can't respond to it. It is deliberate destruction, not just of physical property. That's almost the least important thing, but it is important, and police should be in the position of defending people's private property from the violent destruction that others want to engage in. But the bigger problem is what the left is pushing is not constructive criticism. It is not trying to work together. It is, as you've heard them say, defunding the police, getting rid of police. It is a Marxist demands of all kinds, like massive redistribution of wealth. It is a Marxist revolution using and abusing the argument about race to get to the Marxist demands they want. And this is what we were facing. I thought that black police officer we just listened to was poignant and insightful. I couldn't play his whole clip, of course, but he has been a police officer. He's college educated. He's studied. I mean, he's a really insightful guy. And his commentary about, you know, when a black protester tries to talk to him and a white person jumps in the middle and says, don't talk to the pigs, don't talk to the police, who is it you think is actually trying to solve things, the police or the protesters? Who's doing the better thing? And why wouldn't the protesters want to have interaction with the police? It's vital to understand what we are watching here in July and moving into August of 2020. We're watching a Marxist uprising. And we need to be on the side and supportive of the president who is trying to shut it down, who's saying we're at least going to protect the property that is federal property. We are not going to let our cities dissolve into mayhem. We have to be supportive of a president not willing to put up with that. So the next topic I want to hit really quickly today about Attorney General Barr. So, you know, that clip I played from Jim Jordan, that was played in the hearing of Attorney General Barr going into the House Judiciary Committee. And I'll probably have clips for it tomorrow or Thursday or something from that hearing. But I want to just mention a couple of things about that hearing, just kind of the perspective about it. To start with, ever since President Trump has been in office, I mean, literally ever since he won, even before he took office, there has been a relentless effort by the American left to take him down, to remove him. We watched the whole thing with the now I think should accurately be called Obamagate. It's just Obamagate. It is what Obama and his administration put in place in the years 2015 and 16 and maybe even earlier. The abuse of the FBI and the Department of Justice for the purpose of pushing their Marxist agenda. You had the absolute collusion inside the FBI and the DOJ with the Hillary Clinton campaign, bringing about the completely fake Russian dossier, lying on their applications to go to the FISA court to get warrants to spy on the Trump team. You had a massive effort to take out Trump. Massive effort, millions of dollars spent on the farce of the Mueller investigation, which after millions of dollars and thousands of hours produced zip, zero, nada, nothing, because there was no evidence, because Trump did not collude with the Russians. And this is what they finally were forced to admit. But that wasn't good enough. Okay, so they are forced to admit that. But then they got into the Ukraine farce, the effort, and this was led by Nadler in great part, by the way, the same clown we were talking about earlier. But the effort to remove President Trump through this farce of an accusation related to the Ukraine and related to how President Trump had a conversation with the Ukrainian president in which he did nothing wrong, but he was accused of doing what Biden did and on open television, everyone's seen the clip, and yet the Democrats marched forward trying to take President Trump out. I lay that background out to say that all that has been happening as far as the Democrats are concerned since President Trump won the election is a relentless effort to remove the president, a relentless effort to destroy him, to delegitimize him, to ignore him, to go around him, whether it was the U.S. Army, we talked about earlier today, the U.S. Army putting on training programs, teaching using our tax dollars to train people in the Army that the phrase "Make America Great Again" is an indication of white supremacy. I mean, just evil at its core. But I'm getting around about Attorney General Barr coming to, so he's in Washington today. He's sitting there and being questioned at the House Judiciary Committee. And he did release ahead of time, Attorney General Barr released ahead of time his written statement. And this is, many people do this when they're called into Congress because you know the reason you're called and you want to write out what you're going to say, because odds are you're never going to get to say it. During the questioning, you'll be cut off, you'll be interrupted, you'll be badgered. And that is what's happening. Watch a little bit of it today. It's just badgering him. But part of what they're trying to do, and the reason that Nadler is just dead set determined to, if he can, humiliate Attorney General Barr, is that the left is very worried that it may just happen that Attorney General Barr and U.S. Attorney Durham, who is the main guy looking into the Obamagate Russia collusion hoax, just maybe there's going to be some outcome that makes it out to the news before the election. Just maybe we'll have indictments. Maybe we'll have names, the people we've talked about in the show so many times, but the top players, including John Brennan, but top players, CIA and the DOJ and the FBI, actually named as criminal defendants, actually indicted by grand jury, actually prosecuted, or at least the beginning of that process. And what the Democrats are trying to do now is grease the skids ahead of time to make sure that America has been infested with the lie that Attorney General Barr is just acting as Trump's personal attorney. He's being unprofessional. He is not doing his job. And so when those allegations come along, if they ever do, you're going to have America listening to what you're hearing from Durham and Barr, and those same Americans trained by what they were told in this hearing today and in other statements by Democrats that Barr isn't really objective, he's not really being fair, he's not really doing his job, he's actually just gunning for President Trump. This is an effort to delegitimize Attorney General Barr, and that is the main reason that Barr is up there today. The Democrats do not actually think Barr has done anything wrong. In fact, I'm sure they don't think he's done anything wrong. They're just thinking, how can we make him look bad? So Barr, to his great credit, submitted a statement ahead of time. So let me just tell you what I'm thinking about and what I want to talk about. So his statement is on our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links. I have a link to his written statement. It really matters to understand it because Barr is very savvy. And he said in his statement, we're in a time of political discourse in Washington that reflects the politically divided nation in which we live. And he said, ever since I made it clear, I'm going to do everything I can to get to the bottom of the grave abuses involved in the bogus Russiagate scandal. This is the statement of Attorney General Barr already submitted, and for the world to read and for Congress to read, for Nadler to read, says he is going to do everything he can to get to the bottom of the grave abuses involved in the Russiagate scandal. He says many of the Democrats on this committee, he's speaking to the House Judiciary Committee, have attempted to discredit me by conjuring up a narrative that I am simply the president's factotum who disposes of criminal cases according to his instructions. And he says, judging from the letter inviting me to this hearing, that appears to be your agenda today. So this is, I'm going to get to in a moment about how surreal and unprecedented this whole thing is. But a couple other points that Barr submitted, and so everyone can read, I urge you to read. He talked about how I took this job because I feel completely free to do whatever I think is right, to pursue what I think is right, and I'm going to do that. And he said he was, as an outsider, he become deeply troubled by what he perceived as the increasing use of the criminal justice process as a political weapon and the emergence of two separate standards of justice. And he's talking about this is why he was so upset in watching what the DOJ and FBI were doing in the whole Obamagate disaster, because two standards of justice were evident. He also talked about the George Floyd killing and how, of course, it was horrible. And of course, we stepped right in there, and the justice system is prosecuting those officers involved. But he also talked about the history in America, how, yes, we did, in the early, decades ago, over 50 years ago, yes, we have a very unfair bifurcated justice system. And we have corrected what was so wrong in that, in our laws, in our standards of justice. And so he's basically getting at and talking about the idea that the left is trying to paint policemen, the policing function overall in this country, as infested with racism, with systemic racism. He's getting right at the political agenda of the left, and he's calling it out. He's saying this is not true. Yes, we have people who behave badly and wrongly, and yes, they should be prosecuted, and no one's denying that racism doesn't exist in America, but he's calling out the left's agenda very directly, saying, but you're using this accusation of the police as being racist or engaged in systemic racism as a means to keep America divided. And he's very, very clear in defending the police and saying, that we've made great strides forward. He's really defending not just the police, which he should be, which he is, but he's also just defending America. And he's talking about how the left manipulated George Floyd's death. He says some have chosen to respond to George Floyd's death in a far less productive way by demonizing police, promoting slogans like ACAB, all cops are the B word, the guy B word, I'm not going to say it on the show, and making grossly irresponsible proposals to defund the police. In this hearing, at least a statement made by Barr, rock star level, and I'll tell you the other kind of waste of time the Democrats have really put America through, and that is, I mentioned, since the time that Trump's been running and was elected, the Democrats have engaged 24/7, 365. All they're about is finding some way to attack President Trump and bring him down. It is the entire Democrat agenda. There's no other agenda in place except take Trump down, or if you read their platform, take America down, just continue and develop more and develop this snowball of racial suspicion and tension and division. This is the agenda of the Democrat Party. They live by creating racial tension. It is their purpose for being. That is the source of their power, is creating racial tension. So, bad enough the Democrats do that, but I'll also point out what really has been the consequence of this, among other things, is that Republicans, instead of being in Washington trying to address the many things we must be addressing, such as, getting a secure border, fixing our immigration system, perhaps looking at changes in tax policy, looking at environmental, all sorts of issues that could be looking at, most people in Congress, or many of them, are drawn into and forced into spending their time refuting the lies of the left. Jim Jordan, great example, fabulous guy, great guy. He had to spend the time writing out a refutation, a refuting of, a rebutting of the endless lies the left tells about Attorney General Barr. He, Jordan, put out a lengthy statement saying, all these attacks on Attorney General Barr are untrue, and here's why. Now, thank goodness he has the tenacity. Jim Jordan has the tenacity to do it, but this is something, this should not even be happening. This is what I want to get to in wrapping up this segment. This is a surreal time, a surreal hearing in Washington. Bizarre on steroids. The left is so determined to take down Trump, not just because they don't like his personality or his hairstyle. It's because he is getting to the heart of what the left has done to this country for decades. He is draining the swamp. He is calling out socialism and saying we're not going there and that we're not going to be a socialist country. He is dismantling the socialist effort that the left is making. He is striving to bring America back on the track of freedom, free markets, back on the track of being a country rooted in freedom. Trump is trying to bring America back to what it's supposed to be, and this is what is enraging the left. They can't believe Trump is destroying their decades-long effort to push this country over the cliff to Marxist socialist control in Washington. And Trump is instead trying to restore freedom in this country, restore the idea of America. So Jim Jordan, who could be doing lots of other things with his brilliant intellect, has to spend time, or someone on his staff does, addressing the lies the left tells about Barr and refuting them with truth. It is a bizarre, bizarre time. Can't get real things done in Washington because pretty much the GOP has had to play defense against all that the left is up to, all that the left tries to do to destroy Trump and Barr and Durham and anyone else associated with Trump. So Barr, as far as I saw this morning, was holding his own in Washington. We'll probably play a few clips of that in that whole hearing in the next couple of days. One last topic today I want to hit. I get notes from listeners, a lot of notes from listeners. I do try to hit the topics that you send me, and there just isn't possible to do all of them. But someone sent me a note, and I had not heard about this, so I'm going to tell you this story quickly. And this has to do with COVID and has to do with where we are in this country in dealing with the coronavirus. So a listener sent me this email in which she was talking about a story she heard, and I went and found the story out of a place along the southern border of Texas, a South Texas county, The county is called Starr, S-T-A-R-R. Never heard of it, never been there. Starr County, Texas. But they had a relatively low number of COVID cases. They were doing well, and then they've had a big influx of COVID cases to the point that the hospital is overrun in their community, or that's the story. And so, because that is happening, they literally saying they don't have enough hospital beds for all the people who are suffering, seriously suffering from COVID in Starr County. And to understand, by the way, in case you missed this little factoid, the reason for this uptick is because it's along the southern border, and most of the people filling these hospitals have crossed the Mexican border. But I digress. They have a problem. So what this county did is put out a statement how they're actually going to have to engage in, then this is their term, they're going to engage in having a committee put together to assess the at-risk population, disparity in medical services, low socioeconomic population, and they've reached a tipping point. And they said the county claims it has been forced to form what's being compared to a so-called death panel. The county health board that governs the hospital there, Starr Memorial, is set to authorize critical care guidelines. This past Thursday, that will help medical workers determine ways to allocate scarce medical resources on patients with the best chance of survival, and actually talking about having to send people home to die at home. This is supposedly the point of this. Send people home because they can't find sufficient hospital beds. They're assessing, therefore, who's most likely to survive. They're talking about death panels. That was a story that was run in the very left-wing Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Now, I would like to introduce a little bit of truth to this story. Number one, I cannot imagine the hospital board, the county commissioners, any official with any authority whatsoever in the great state of Texas is going to authorize death panels and sending people home to die at home, that's the claim, when we live in the great state of Texas, where we have had doctors all over the state talking about finding effective treatments and using effective treatments on the COVID-19. Literally, we have had hydroxychloroquine, which we've had Dr. Robin Armstrong of Houston on this show. We've had Yvette Lozano of Dallas, another doctor using hydroxychloroquine. Doctors around the country talking about hydroxychloroquine along with other things they use with it. I always forget the names of the other two things, but you have doctors talking about finding this treatment completely effective. As in, literally, Robert Armstrong on my show, a doctor in Houston, said the entire senior citizen nursing home for which he is the doctor, they had a COVID-19 outbreak. They had massive numbers, and he treated him, hydroxychloroquine, and the two other things that go with it, and everybody survived. Everyone except one person who was 102 years old, and her family said, she's got other conditions, other lethal, other pre-existing conditions. Don't start her on something new. Beside that, they all survived. On top of that, you may have seen in Washington yesterday, there was a public, like a public town hall, a frontline, they called it frontline doctors, called a press conference in front of the Supreme Court. Doctors from all over the country standing there and saying, let us tell you, we're using hydroxychloroquine, and it is working. We are finding patients being healed by using hydroxychloroquine. Doctors standing there voluntarily went to Washington to stand there in front of the cameras. They said their names. They said what they've been doing, and they are talking about hydroxychloroquine works to effectively treat COVID-19. And yet, that conference, which went viral, of course it went viral on Twitter, viral all over the internet, and every social media outlet in this country has taken it down. I'm talking Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube have taken it down. No one's allowed to see this conference. No one. You're not allowed to do it. It is like they're saying, we aren't going to let you know there is a cure, that there is an effective treatment. They're just saying, no, no, no. And I have to tell you, and even you can see the notice, some of you have seen quite often on Twitter and Facebook and all over social media, that this posting violates our community standards about safety in the era of COVID-19. So doctors who are actually practicing medicine, looking in the camera saying, my name is so-and-so, and I've used this on my COVID-19 patients, and they're getting better, and they're recovering. And one woman who's a Houston doctor, who's actually from Africa, she's from Nigeria, but she lives here now, practices medicine here now, she's treated successfully 350 patients who had COVID-19, and the survival rate is all 350 got over COVID-19. All 350. But the media says, I don't want to hear this. We're going to talk more about this censoring, but they've been shut down. I've also had, so I want to know why these doctors in Starr County, why the county commissioner's court, why everyone involved is not screaming from the rooftops, hey, instead of sending all you people home to die, which is what they're claiming, why don't you send them to doctors or let them know about this and have them find their own doctors who might prescribe the COVID treatment? Why not? Why not do this? It's the most outrageous thing imaginable that their answer is send them home to die versus understand that treatments are available. Last thing before I go to why it matters to you, I had on my show on July 2nd, actually, I had Dr. Richard Bartlett. He is a doctor from Midland, Texas. He is successfully treating COVID-19 patients with an inhaled steroid used with a nebulizer, inhaled steroid called budesonide. He's had the same thing, tremendous results, people getting better, treatment after treatment after treatment, hundreds of patients. He's been all over media, going everywhere he can, saying, we don't have to be scared, this works. My point is, people, ask yourself why, and we're going to have to come back to this another day, but ask yourself why. You have doctors claiming these things. You have a new study out of the Henry Ford Health System, other studies around the country showing hydroxychloroquine works, and the answer of the media. And even an article is on our website. You can go to an article out of Newsweek, another doctor from Yale, Harvey Reisch, talking about, he's a professor of epidemiology at Yale School of Public Health, talking about hydroxychloroquine works. It works on COVID-19. We have a cure. Why aren't we using it? Ask yourself that, folks. What is the agenda? I have an answer, but I can't do it today. What is the reason to fight so hard to keep America in the dark, keep America ignorant about treatments that are working for COVID-19? I'll get to the answer to that another day, because at this point we're out of time. I'm going to turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. We started our show today talking about the Army's Operation Inclusion, a training program for the United States Army. Includes blatant leftist indoctrination. Being more inclusive means alertness to covert white supremacy in ideas such as Make America Great Again, All Lives Matter, One Human Race, denial of white privilege, color blindness, English-only initiatives, celebrating Columbus Day. Americans must wake up to these implications. The left is relentlessly at work to destroy America. Do America's military leaders have the moral clarity to reject this? Let's hope so. As to the peaceful protest update, the video prepared for the House Judiciary meeting was a powerful rebuke to Nadler's myth. 18 Portland rioters have been arrested for arson, assaulting police officers, and more. No sane person would call these riots in U.S. cities peaceful. The U.S. Congress, under the Democrat majority, is dangerously unserious. Denying the reality of violent riots will never lead to law and order. Making every moment of every day about accusations against Trump is not doing the people's business. It is simply power-mad agitation, obstruction, and leftist propaganda. And Attorney General Barr goes to Congress. AG Barr is the picture of competence and experience, unfazed by the theatrics of the left. Barr's opening statement to Nadler's committee was strong, very direct, in refuting accusations of being the president's factotum or personal attorney. House Judiciary Committee under Nadler reminds Americans of an unserious Congress. Democrat members' questions are for cameras and sound bites. Barr is not allowed to answer or mostly talked over. Dems believe that mainstream media echo chamber is America, but it's not. But will American patriots still wonder if Barr has the fortitude for full prosecution of the Obamagate perpetrators? I think he does. I hope so. And on COVID censors and death panels, doctors treating real COVID patients with real success go to D.C. to tell their stories. At the same time, a Texas border county convenes death panels to decide who can or can't be hospitalized for COVID treatment. The media reaction? Google, Facebook, Twitter take down the doctor's success video. All news of cures and treatments other than a vaccine is silenced. Americans must rise to ask and demand an answer to: why is this happening? What kind of people do not want a cure for COVID? Why are the 20, 30-somethings of social media companies entitled to decide what all Americans are entitled to hear about COVID treatments? Who made them? Medical experts. Americans are right to suspect an agenda at work about politics, not health. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America, because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.